right, welcome back to another episode of the Rep by Rep Strength podcast. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So I've got a couple notes here about some things I want to talk about that I've been seeing on social media past couple weeks, and also a couple papers that I've been reviewing for my biomechanics class, and what do they say? So number one, something that's been getting a ton of attention, probably the past 5 to 10 years, has been, how much volume do people actually need? So when we're looking at training, very early on, I was working with Coach Robe at Ball State, and this concept came up, like, when do you begin, talking about how many sets does someone need to do within the session? When do you start counting those sets? Do you count the warm-ups? All this stuff that I had, because at the time I was an undergrad, I didn't know any of this stuff. So, what I remember him telling me early was, I don't start counting sets until someone's using at least 60% of their 1RM. It's like, okay, this at least gives me some benchmark, some metric to work off of. Now, how many sets someone does is dependent on their goals, and there are certainly times where, since that initial conversation, where, okay, well, if I've got an athlete, who's trying to work on power or speed, maybe they don't use anywhere close to 60% of their 1RM because they're going to do some absolute speed things, or maybe they're going to throw a medicine ball, or they're going to do a jump variation with 30% 1RM. So that's not an end-all be-all metric, but if we're getting into strength training work specifically, I've noticed that 60% 1RM is a good starting point for most people to begin counting sets. So, how much do people need is kind of the question. And what's really popular right now is, well, somewhere in the wheelhouse of 10 to 20 sets per session is plenty. And I tend to hedge towards the lower end of that, because I'm a big advocate for, okay, well, let's get adequately recovered. Let's get as recovered as we can in preparation for the next session. Now, if I'm going to lift on a Thursday and then I'm not going to train again until Monday, okay, I've got some extra time in there. I might push a little more volume. I might push the intensity a bit more, whatever, because I know I've got some extra time. But more often than not, I'm going to hedge towards slightly less volume, because since I know that I have fewer sets that I'm going to perform during a session, those sets by default matter more and are more important. So, I can take my warm-ups all I want, but then when it's actually time to do my work sets, most of the time I'm going to do somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to, on the extreme high end, might be 5 sets. But oftentimes 2 to 3 sets of very hard work sets is going to be plenty. And in terms of, how do you quantify the intensity, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can say, RPE, you can go off of percentage of 1 rep max. There's a couple different ways to do it. But if we're working off of 1 rep max, most of the time, your best training, the bulk of your training, should be in that neighborhood of 70 to 85% of your 1 rep max. Now, occasionally, and you should have some sort of systematic plan, structure, way of training that makes logical sense. So you're not going to just do things at random. One of my favorite sayings is, if you want random results, do random training. And there's too many people that do that. They just walk into the weight room. I might say hey to them and say, hey, what are you doing today? And they say, I don't know, I haven't figured it out yet. That's a really bad strategy. That's a really bad plan, because that's not even a plan, right? That's just somebody walking in and on a whim saying, well, this feels okay. Now, there's certainly some advanced people out there who can do that, and that's typically more reserved for bodybuilders who are going to, they've been training for 20 or 30 years, something like that. But by and large, they have a rough idea of what they're going to do, but they never come in just completely off script and say, well, I have no clue. Okay, so, we just have to remember that everything we add in, the more we do, it's just simply more that must be recovered from. So if you have that time, if you have that luxury of, I can sleep more, I can put more calories, like quality calories in my body, I can buy more supplementation, those, if you can do that, great. But just understand that, the more that you're adding in is more that has to be recovered from at the end of the day. So sleep is the number one thing that's going to help. A very close second would be, you could make a strong argument for calories, because you have to provide the literal framework for, training is a breakdown process. It's not a build-up process. And I think a lot of people get confused with that. They think, oh, well, I'm going to the gym to get better. And yes, you are going in the gym to get better, but you are going in the gym during the training session. You're breaking things down, and the recovery process is absolutely key to improving, regardless of what it is you want to get better at or train for or whatever. But you have to give the body time to rest and recover and heal, and have the hormone dumps that you're looking for. That's where sleep comes in. And then you're going to have to provide the literal building blocks for the body to repair and help structures heal. That's where the calories come in. So oftentimes, especially in our culture here in the States, is, we think more is better for everything, forever and always. And that's often not the case with training. I find that I've got a few guys I'm working with right now, and I've told them to do less and less and less, and they're continuing to improve. So every time, and there will be a cutoff, but every time we cut their training volume, well, now they're hitting new records. Well, why is that? Well, it's because they're healing, they're recovered. They can actually have the energy. They're sleeping better. They're eating more. They're continuing to bump their performance. So there will be a cutoff where, okay, well, we're too low of volume. Now we need to bump it back up just a hair. But understanding that it is a process. And oftentimes a very, very basic training program is what is going to work the best. Too many people think that they need some highly specialized training program, and that's often not the case. There are some people who have, they've been injured, or they might have literal plates and screws and things like that in their hands, knees, wrists, whatever, and they cannot do certain things. But most people are going to respond very well to a super basic training program. And basic does not mean simple. I think that's where people get confused, and they think, oh, well, this is basic. I'm well past that. I don't need that. And that's just not the case. Is you want to follow something that's structured and systematic, and that makes sense, and that you can load over time. And then at some point that will stop working. And when whatever that training program is, it stops working, now you go in, now you make these tweaks and these adjustments. But these tweaks and adjustments I'm referring to don't need to be massive tweaks and adjustments. It can be something as simple as, hey, I'm not responding to a high bar back squat anymore. Okay, so for a period of time, let's visit a low bar back squat. Then we'll push that, and then when that doesn't work anymore, maybe we visit a front squat. And then that's not to say we, once we rotate to a new exercise, that's not to say that you don't ever revisit those exercises. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, there is some staleness that will occur with performing the exact same movements over and over and over again. And performing the exact same movements over and over again makes you more susceptible to just overuse injuries and things of that nature. So we do want to be systematic in how and why we're rotating exercises. But a friend of mine works with some professional athletes, some of the best athletes in the world. And him and I were having a conversation one day about training. And, my question was, what kind of advanced methods is he using with these guys? And most of them are not doing anything highly advanced. Most of them are so well developed and world class at their skill that's what's gotten them to the top. They are not necessarily elite performers in the weight room. Most of the time they haven't even been to a weight room, and if they have, they haven't really trained. Now there are some who have worked their ass off in the weight room, have done their skill work, have worked really hard in the weight room, and have been to good programs and things like that. So that's not all encompassing by any means, but it's kind of interesting. You've got these world-class athletes who are learning how to goblet squat, who are learning how to do proper pull-ups and proper push-ups, and that is continuing to enhance their ability to perform their sport. And that's what we need to remember here, is that whatever it is you're working towards, oftentimes the weight room is a means to an end. It is, outside of people who compete in strongman or powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting or whatever, outside of those three things, the weight room is not their sport. The weight room is a means to an end. And the same for the general population. If you've got general population who generally wants to be healthier, be stronger, have some more muscle, okay, they're going to train a couple times a week anaerobically, and then they'll train a couple times a week aerobically, and then they'll move on about their day. They don't want to be in the gym. More often than not, they don't want to be in the gym all day. They want to be in and out in under an hour. So you can get very, very good quality work done, whether you're an athlete or gen pop, working out hard and training hard in under an hour. Most of the time, I would even push that to be under 45 minutes, because we have things to do while we're in the weight room, and everything is structured and organized. We're not just going to, do a set and then wait 5 minutes. How it's going to work best most of the time is it's going to work best by performing a set, then doing some mobility work of some kind, doing some stretching if need be for a different area than you're training, and then you're going to come back and hit another set. So it's constant work, it's constant movement in the gym. It's not just, hey, do 5 reps and then rest for 5 or 10 minutes and don't do anything. It's not effective in terms of time. So we want to make sure things are planned and organized. So all of this can be done in under 45 minutes. All of this can be done somewhere in the wheelhouse of 10 to 20 sets, and using 70 to 85% of our 1RM. And then there are times that we will push those thresholds where we'll go higher than 85% for sure. But that should not be an all the time thing. And the reason why is when you start pushing greater than 90% all the time, well, now we have to take a step back and ask, is that training or is that testing? And it can happen real quick, is it can turn into a testing session, because it's fun to push heavy weights. It's fun to lift really hard and heavy and push limits. That's cool. But the problem is every one of those reps above 90% has, every lift you ever do will have an associated risk with it. But everything you do above 90% is going to, get a tad riskier. It's also going to have a bit more fatigue associated with it. So, okay, I took that single at 90%, took another single at 95%. Okay, now what's the potential outcome of this if I take it at 102.5%? Okay, I might hit a new record. That'd be cool. But I'm also pretty likely to be very tired the next day. Not necessarily sore, but very tired. And then what's the bad aspect that could happen is, well, I could get injured in this, and I know that, and that's okay. I made peace with that. But you just need to understand that there is an associated risk, and you need to understand that risk as you go heavier and heavier. And that's not to scare people away from training. That's just to say we want to be calculated, and we want to figure out when is it appropriate to push those numbers. So because also on the flip side of that, I see too many people that come in the gym and do the exact same thing, sets, reps, intensity wise, for years, and they don't really make any progress. It's great that they're doing something, but if you're doing the exact same thing all the time, the body is going to respond less over time. So if you think of it like this: if you have 100 motor units that are going to accomplish a task, let's call it a bodyweight squat. If I have 100 motor units that are going to accomplish that task, well, when you're a beginner, maybe all of those 100 motor units are going to be required. Like, it's going to take everything you got because it's new, it's challenging, and then you start adding load, and still requiring all those motor units. Okay, well, now I'm holding an empty barbell and doing 10 squats or whatever, still requiring 100 motor units, right? Well, now if I do the exact same sets, exact same reps, exact same weight, and I don't even add weight to the bar, over time the body's going to become more efficient. And if you want to think of it like, okay, now it's going to maybe require 80 motor units, and then 70 motor units, and then 60 motor units. There's going to be a point of diminishing returns where it does have to kick on some motor units, if you will, because the body's never dormant. It's just, the point here is that the body becomes increasingly efficient. So we need to introduce more stress to the system to force the body to adapt. So you can do a couple different methods to increase stress on the system. You can add a bit more load, maybe an additional set, maybe a couple extra reps, whatever. Not that any one of those is better or worse than the other. It's just that you have to make a decision. Which one of these is going to provide the greatest result in terms of performance increase? And you can certainly get into some arguments, some debate there about which one's better. Most of the time, I would gradually bump up the load, the training load, and hold the volume steady, hold the sets steady, and just continue bumping up the load. And there will be a cutoff point where bumping up the training load is just simply not feasible. It's just not going to work anymore for what I'm trying to get to. So then it might become a tad more complex, where I say, okay, well, maybe instead of my 5 sets of 3, maybe I flip that and go 5 sets of 3. So, or excuse me, three instead of the 3 sets of 5, maybe I flip that and do 5 sets of 3. So, there is a point where certain things are no longer going to respond the way you want. And there's a lot of debate about, well, is it better to add in a 4th set and a 5th set, or to adjust the reps, or to adjust the training intensity? There's all sorts of things that people can argue about that they've had success with over the years. So it's not the end all be all in this example. It's just more important to understand that you do need to increase training load. You do need to not do the same thing for years and years and years. You do need to manipulate certain variables. So anyway, let's move on here to, so I'm reading a paper right now for biomechanics, and they're analyzing the golf swing. And at the end of the paper, they're talking about, what are the two primary ways that you can, make the golf swing faster, the club head speed. And they basically boil it down in this paper to 2 strategies. You can either do strategy 1 or strategy 2, and they make no reference to improving or increasing ground reaction force via weight training. And that is a huge mistake. That should be one of the most fundamental, simplest ways to increase ground reaction force. How much force can you put through the ground is what GRF, ground reaction force, refers to. So the whole point of this paper, and I've seen it elsewhere as well, is that a lot of people are under this presumption that, well, here's my sport, I need to stay out of the weight room and just do my sport. Okay, let's think about this for a second. So there are, certainly, you do need to practice your sport. That's first and foremost skill specific, or the thing that you want to be better at. I mean, firemen have to practice fire specific things. Police have to practice police specific things. Tactical population, same thing. Athletes, same thing. But so you've got to practice your stuff of what it is you're going to be doing. But we also have to remember that if we want to make our jobs easier, whatever our jobs are, the stronger we are, the easier those jobs become, the more economical we become. And frankly, leaves us with more energy to do other things. Because if you think of strength as a ceiling, if I have a ceiling of 100 and that's my limit, and then just living my life, doing stuff around the house costs me 70 points of that ceiling, if you will. Well, I'm going to be pretty tired because I'm doing a lot of those things at 70, and that's just going to wear me out. But if I can raise that ceiling by another 100 points, and I'm still doing stuff around my house that is the same number, well, now I've got, from an economical standpoint, it's a hell of a lot easier because my ceiling is higher. So if I want to, like, I'm looking at this golf paper right now, if I want to make golfing easier, and I've got the skill of the sport nailed down, which I totally don't, I'm not a golfer, but now how can I put more force through the ground? Well, I can do some simple things. I can jump, I can throw objects, I can deadlift, squat, do push presses, clean snatches, whatever. Those are all going to influence my ability to increase my GRF. So that is going to make my golf game better, right? So I see this I was talking with a basketball coach a couple weeks ago, and he works with junior high and high school girls, and he just has his junior high and high school girls just do jumping drills all the time. And my pushback to him was this: well, why don't you have them do basic squatting and deadlifting? Aren't they jumping enough already during practice and during games? And he said, yeah, but squatting and deadlifting is dangerous. And this myth is so pervasive in all sports. And, people are still operating under this assumption that weightlifting is dangerous. It's not. I'll see guys, there's people I know personally who deadlift 730 pounds, who squat 600 pounds. And newbies might come in the gym and say, like, oh, well, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to get hurt, or whatever. And the guys that I know of who do those things, who do squat those numbers, who do deadlift those numbers, I haven't seen them be hurt. The reason they haven't gotten hurt is because it's not like these guys woke up one day and they just walked into the gym and said, you know what, I'm going to deadlift 730 pounds today, or I'm going to just walk in and squat 600. It's not how it works. When people get hurt in the gym, there's usually a reason for it. And here's a couple of those reasons. Number one, we can look at inappropriate technique. Number two, how is their breathing and bracing? Number three, how is their loading strategy? Have they loaded inappropriately week over week, or set to set, or whatever? Usually that's a big one. And then you can look at stress levels. If they're super stressed out, or they're more likely to get injured. So with a lot of this stuff, it's very simple. It's sensible progressions, and listening to your body and saying, okay, well, if something doesn't feel right, just shift the training day to the right. Live to fight another day, because and I've made this mistake myself, is where I can tell you the number of times where I've hurt myself in the gym, and it was stupid, and I was younger, and I felt something twinge on each occasion on the prior to the rep that made something hurt really bad for a couple weeks, and I just ignored the signs, I ignored the signals, and I said, I'll just be all right. And then sure enough, the next rep was not good. So anyway, that's where, listen to your body, figure out what's going on, and then follow a system. So that's what, the third or fourth time I've said that now, is follow a systematic approach of some kind. Follow something that is logical. Don't just randomly do stuff. And then gradually increase the load on the bar. That is the cornerstone of all strength training, is progressive overload. So notice that I didn't assign a percentage. I didn't assign a given weight. Just increase the load on the bar, period. There's a client that I work with who bought some micro plates. And this was a new product I'd never heard of, but it's exactly what it sounds like. And she bought these micro plates that go up in 0.25 pounds. And they're like tiny little magnets that can be put on the side of the bar. So, if she's lifting 100 pounds, cool, she can put 1.25 pound plate on each side and, just gradually work up that way. And I'm pretty sure this company might even have them where they go up smaller increments than that. But the point is that she's progressively overloading the system. It doesn't matter how small the overload is. It's just that she's overloading it. So that's, another reason why I prefer to hold volume steady and gradually increase the load. It's simpler, allows a technique to really get dialed in over time. And then, if she's missing reps or whatever, now we'll make some adjustments. But the system that we have for her seems to be working very, very well. So anyway, the point is, if you're trying to become a better athlete, police officer, fireman, tactical athlete, whatever, then get stronger is essentially the solution for everybody, even general population. And one example I'll give you for general population and why strength is so important is strength is one of those things that becomes increasingly important as you age. And the simplest example is, think of your grandmother or grandfather. Now, what if they fall? Well, hopefully they don't break a hip, because if an elderly person breaks a hip, it's very, very difficult to come back from in terms of, it not being a fatal break in terms of, the recovery process and all that stuff. Anyway, so like if they were to fall and not break something, are they able to get up off the floor by themselves? What if they live by themselves and they're going to check the mail and they slip? Can they get out? It's a cold environment. Like, what if it's a cold environment and, temperature's down, they go and check the mail, they fall. Can they get up by themselves? Or could that potentially be fatal because it's so cold outside? Or you can even flip that script and say, hey, what if they live in a hot environment and they live by themselves and they fall? Can they get up before they dehydrate? These are real life things that we need to think about. That's the emphasis of one of the reasons why strength is so important. Another cold weather example is the stronger you are, the quicker you can express that strength with power. Okay, so if you want to think of power as simply our ability to express strength quickly, okay. Usually when we're hearing the word power, we're saying, okay, well, there's a time constraint. There's time involved in some capacity. So this was a very eye-opening example to me that I remember from basically when we were going through a motor unit course, was if you think of an elderly person in their 70s, okay, walking down the street, they hit a patch of ice. If they have been strength training, then they can pick up their foot and replace it, and now they'll have a better base in which to have a chance to prevent a fall. If they have not been strength training and they slip on that ice, now what is their ability like to be able or not able to pick up that foot and replace it to give them a better base and a better chance and prevent them from falling? So that's just some of the reasons why strength is so important. But at the end of the day, put more pain on the bar. Follow a systematic, organized approach to your training, and put more pain on the bar is the goal. So with that, we don't need these highly complex exercises. We don't need these obscure exercises. Those are not what's going to lead to success, right? And I'll give you a couple examples here. Is recently I've been seeing some people who go to the gym and they hook up these bands to a cable machine and they do all these really weird, obscure movements, and then they go sell their products and tell people like, hey, this band that I have hooked up to this cable machine and I kind of perform athletic looking type things with it is what got me looking so big, jacked, and strong. And here's the thing. That person and those people who do those kinds of things, those people are liars. Because what made them look the way they do is the fundamental movements of squatting, deadlifting, pressing, pulling, carrying, jumping, and throwing, and some Olympic lift variants if you want to add them in. They were not getting big and jacked doing these really weird or obscure movements. They sell people the solution or the guise of, well, contact me so that I can, because I'm the only one who knows how to coach these very obscure movements. That's the guise that they sell it under, right? And it's to me comes across as manipulative. It's a lie. It's lying, and I just can't tolerate it. So be very careful about people that you follow on social media. Go back and check into the history on some of this stuff, because the history here is super interesting, number one, but also you can see what's worked, starting in the 1800s, what were people doing then when they started strength training? There's some great accounts out there that are super interesting. Range of Strength, Strongman Archaeology. There's another book I used to have called, I think it was just called Strength in America by Dr. Todd. I want to say Terry Todd, Dr. Terry Todd, I believe. Super interesting on the history of strength training. And the point is if you go back and you look at the history of training, what have people done over the course of time that has led to success? Not just in terms of top end numbers, but in terms of getting very strong, in terms of becoming very healthy. What are the common things that these people all did? So they weren't selling bands. They weren't trying to manipulate people and say hey, you need these real obscure exercises. It was all of them were doing variations of squatting and deadlifting, pressing, pulling, carrying. So, you'll notice throughout this podcast, not just this episode, but many others, where I'm going to say some of the same stuff of there's a reason that I say some of the same things all the time of squatting, deadlifting, pushing, pulling, carrying. Those are your big money makers. And then you can do some ballistic stuff. I think those are highly underrated things. Ballistic that I'm referring to here would be jumping, throwing, and Olympic lift variants. Things that are very fast in nature are great to do, as well as the slower type movements. But yeah, just stick with some basic stuff in terms of what is the best, causes the least amount of pain potentially, squat variation for you, or what's the best deadlift variation for you. And you can look up all the creative ways that people have used a barbell or dumbbells or kettlebells over time. And you can do a lot of variations if you're someone who likes variation. Just the key is, get a notepad and write down, like, date your stuff and write down exactly what you did at whatever given weight, so that when you come back to that, that exercise again, now you have a record of it and you can say, okay, for reference, what's my goal today? What's the one thing that I want to work on? Do I want to work on the same weight but trying to hit an extra rep, or do I want to do an extra set? Okay, last time I did 3 sets of 5, maybe this time I do 4 sets of 5. There's all sorts of different methods and different ways you can train. The important aspect, though, is having a system, an organized way of putting this stuff together, so you're not just doing random stuff. Because if you're just doing random stuff, then you're never going to reach anything, because you've never set a goal in the first place. Because if you had set a goal, then you wouldn't do random things. You'd organize everything towards that goal. So, let's see. I got one more piece here. Yeah. So some other things have been kind of circulating social media the past couple months. I'm a little bit behind here. So closing out the NBA season, you saw Halliburton get an Achilles rupture, and then a month or two later, LeBron's deadlift was going around on social media, and you had all these people criticizing how he's deadlifting and all this stuff. So, just to address those two, because those were real popular in the little human performance world I live in, is there are some people out there who are not performance experts in any capacity that were criticizing Halliburton and his Achilles tendon rupture. Some people are so arrogant to even say that they could have prevented it and all this other stuff. And at the core of it, pretty likely that it was you got multiple things. Like at the core of it, you don't 100% know what caused him to rupture his Achilles tendon at that time. But what are the things that we do know? Well, some of the stuff that we do know is that he's playing in the finals, super stressful. It's been a long season. Load management's a hot topic right now, especially in the NBA. These guys, we also know that NBA players have very long levers. So he was probably underslept in some capacity because excitement of the game. There's just all sorts of, my point is there's all sorts of unknowns, and we can't 100% do anything to prevent any kind of injury, really, when it comes to competitive sport. That's just kind of an entertaining piece to me, is that you have people coming out of the woodwork that are that are saying that they can do this and they could do that. And if I was this person, I would have done this to prevent XYZ. It's not that simple. The human body is highly complex, and there's a lot of factors at play that can lead to injuries. The other quick note here is, a video that's circulating of LeBron doing some deadlifts and how weird it looked, how unusual it is, and all this stuff, and he's doing it wrong, and blah blah blah. Well, here's the thing: is when I was finishing up my undergrad, I was an intern with the Indiana Pacers for 6 months, and I got a chance to, see these NBA players train and help out a little bit here and there, because ultimately these players and other professional players are investments for these teams, and that's how they are viewed, in my opinion. If anybody's arguing that, these teams will say they care and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, they're investments, right? And when you look at these players, especially up close, like there's, I think the center for the Pacers when I was there was Roy Hibbert, and I think he's 7'2", right? And then some of those other guys, there's 6'6" to 6'9", Occasionally you have some guys above 6'9". But anyway, the point is those long levers, you have completely different demands, and there's certain things they just cannot do. And like they take a 7'2" guy and try to get him to squat like an Olympic lifter, good luck. And there's a lot of restrictions and things that just don't move the way you're expecting them to move. So when LeBron is, what's LeBron, 6'9", 260 or something. So when you watch him deadlift, we don't know the full story. We don't have full context about why he was performing the deadlift the way he was performing it. He's, one of the greatest players of all time for sure, but he's been in like his longevity is what gets me. This guy's been in the league for 20 years at this point. He's and his injury rate for being in the league this long is extremely low. So, he may not do everything that we would like to see him do in terms of, well, it should look like this in my mind's eye, right? But his longevity is there. It's hard to argue with that piece. And when these players are doing their off-season training, the fans don't care. The organization doesn't care in terms of how much they deadlift, how much they squat. What do the fans care about? What does the organization care about? They care about, is this grouping of players going to help us win a championship or not? So if he needs to do these deadlifts, shoot, who knows? Maybe these deadlifts make him feel good. Maybe they take some pressure off. I have no clue because I'm not there. But you've got these players that are investments, and all the organization wants them to do is to come back and help us win a championship. That's it. And you see some of this stuff that we frankly can't explain. Like LeBron probably has some unusual stuff he does in the off season, because I could look what Aaron Rodgers does in the off season is kind of unusual. What Tom Brady did when he played, in terms of how restrictive his diet was, the things he would use as far as like, I only use these bands, and Terrell Owens only use these bands, and all this stuff allegedly. Look, it's hard to argue with the results of these guys. And, there's just stuff that we don't know with human performance about. Well, shouldn't it just be as simple as inputs and outputs? For most people, probably. But we also have to remember just a normal bell curve distribution. There's outliers with everything. And if somebody's playing professional sport, they are already an outlier. So it's kind of funny because professional sport is a grouping of outliers. And then from there, then you continue to have further separation of, okay, this guy's pretty good in whatever professional organization, but this guy's great. And if he needs to do yoga for 5 hours a day in order to make him feel good and prepared for the game next week, cool. Do it. Do whatever you need to do, because you can do things in this outlier organization that nobody else can do. So anyway, just a couple extra notes there. Next time you see some professional athletes on social media or whatever, doing whatever appears to be obscure, just remember, you don't have full context. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. And I think everybody's, especially in the human performance world, is pretty on board. Like, hey, this might look unusual, but it helps this guy. So anyway, think that's about all the notes I've got for today. So if there's anything in particular that you would like to learn more about, please don't hesitate to DM me on Instagram at Coach Travis Barrett, or you can drop me an email directly, travis@dhpcoaching.net. And if there's, I also offer free discovery calls. So if you've got a unique situation where either A, you want some one-on-one coaching, I offer that, or B, I also do offer some consulting as well. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please, the best thing you can do for me is, if you found this helpful, just to pass it along to friend, family member, coworker, and just share this with someone that you think might find this helpful. All right, and I'll sign off until next time. Have a good day.